Hello there, you're welcome to HisGov TV, and my name is K.A Abrefa. Now, in this video, we are going to look at the fall of Busia's government. We are going to discuss some of the reasons that led to the fall of for the Progress Party, Busia, in 1972. Now, to begin with our discussions, bear in mind that Busia was from the UGCC, they are all descendants of the UGCC party, which had opposed Nkrumah right from day one. Now, after the overthrow of Nkrumah in 1966, a new election was held in 1969. And so, with the absence of Nkrumah and the CPP being banned, because the CPP was banned from contesting in that election, nobody was asked to contest that election with the name the Convention People's Party. And that led to the fall of the CPP. Even today, we don't see the relevance of the CPP in our political space. It was mainly because of that. And I'm sure that those who did it, they did it for their own selfish interest. Now, because of that incident of disbanding the CPP, it made Busia, Kofi, Abrefa Busia, the favorite among the people. And don't forget, these were the same people who had been opposing Nkrumah, for criticizing him on all angles. And so, if the person is no more there, then automatically the light falls on you. So, Busia came to office in 1969. Now, despite the remarkable achievements of Abrefa Busia, in a period of 26 months, he was overthrown in a coup, and this coup was conducted on January 13th, 1972, and the coup was orchestrated by Ignatius Kutu, a champion who was part of the Ghana army. Now, the reasons for the overthrow of Busia can be found in three areas, being political, economic, or social issues. So in this video, I'm just going to introduce you to some 4 or 5 reasons for coming from both political, social, and also economic reasons for the overthrow of the Busia's regime. So now, let's begin with the first of the reasons. One was Busia's dismissal of 568 public servants. Now, Article 9 of the transitional provisions of the 1969 Constitution, provided for the dismissal of public servants for corruption, inaptitude, and inefficiency. So, a new constitution was implemented in 1969 to usher in the Second Republic. Now, Article 9 of that constitution provided that the president could dismiss public servants if they were found to be corrupt or they were incompetent. And so, based on this provision, Busia dismissed 568 public servants, dismissed in the sense that they were asked to go home, no work for them. So you can imagine if your father was part. Now, one of the dismissed public servants, called K.A challenged this dismissal and pursued, of course, his right in court. And the court, of course, ruled in favor of Salah. But Busia rejected the court's verdict. The people became disappointed in Busia's, of course, reaction, because he stood for democratic principles. Busia is one of the one of the people or political figures whom we have praised as a man who stood for democratic principles. And I have watched a video of Kofi speaks about him with so much passion. He was even crying that such a man could be overthrown, and I think I watched it on YouTube. The former president was actually crying, shedding tears. So a man of such democratic principles, why would you reject the court's decision to bring back E.K. Sala. So the people became fed up that you are challenging the independence of the judiciary. And that accounted for one of the reasons for the removal of Busia from office. Now, the next reason was that of Busia's advocacy of dialogue with South Africa. Now, Busia, introduced a certain policy of dialogue with the then apartheid South African states, which did not favor a lot of many Ghanaians and even some African states. Now, for the Progress Party's government stance, or Busia's stance, was in sharp contrast to the country's earlier position, and also for that of some African countries on apartheid system. Now, South Africa was engaged in this whole apartheid, gala or drama, where the black majority were being discriminated against. The white minority were the ones ruling. And so, for instance, in South Africa, there could be a lavish bench there, one lavish bench, but you realize that the lavish bench will be divided into two with photographs, images, showing that this is white. Anywhere you see that they've written white, it means it is a seat reserved for only white. When you see black, it is a seat reserved for only blacks. Even in buses, there were seats reserved for blacks and seats also reserved for the white. The most annoying thing about this apartheid system was even that the white minority, sent all the blacks for majority to the rural areas like Soweto. They kept all of them there. And then for Johannesburg, Joburg, for the capital of South Africa, was controlled by this white minority. So if you were a black man and you wanted to come to Joburg or Johannesburg, you needed a passbook. And that passbook, they give you a number of days to spend in Joburg. When the police catches you that the time or the number of days given to you, you have exceeded that, you will be in trouble. That was the nature of the apartheid system in South Africa. And if you happen to have read a book, Susie Banson is Dead, that play depicts really was what happened in South Africa. The book was, to give you a short, summary of the book. It was a man who had moved from Soweto to South Africa, to Johannesburg, and his passbook, the number of days given to him, had elapsed, so he had to go back to Soweto. But then in Soweto, he had also, families to feed, and therefore he couldn't have gone back. Now, so one day he was walking, and then he found a dead black man there, and he searched him, and he found out that the dead black man had a passbook, and his days, he still had, some days to spend in Joburg. So what the man did was that he took off the picture of the dead man's, he took off the dead man's picture and then pasted his picture there. So in essence, he has now changed his name to be called Susie Banson. Meanwhile, Susie Banson is dead. It's a very interesting book. So that was the kind of, regime that the white minority were into in South Africa. So many African states had decided to cut off any diplomatic ties with South Africa. Here we were with Busia still trying to talk with the South African government when all African countries had actually come together to stand against that. So at a time when the international community was trying to isolate South Africa, to put more effort, to put more pressure on the white minority and on the white minority government to give independence or to allow for an election, Busia, I think, was not really interested in that. So he still wanted to talk with South Africa. And that also tinted his image, both internationally and even, locally. Now, the next reason for Busia's overthrow had to do with his introduction of the Student Loans Scheme. Now, the introduction of the Student Loan Scheme Act of 1971, under which university students were required, for instance, or for the first time in the history of Ghana, for the first time, university students were required to contribute to maintenance charges, what of course Busia are regarded as what maintenance charges, whereas the government took care of the tuition, and this had a very bad image of the government. Remember, under the CPP in Nkrumah, university education was free. Students were given, for maintenance fees. Students were you paid nothing. Books, everything was free. But then Busia came and changed that policy. He, felt that the students should pay for maintenance charges, whereas the government will then pay for the tuition, or will take care of the tuition. And this scheme came with its own sharp criticisms from both the students as well as the parents, who felt that this was a total deviation of what Nkrumah stood for, his free education policy that Nkrumah had introduced. So some also argue that the scheme was a policy by government to shrink its responsibility of educating the country's citizens at that level. And so all these criticisms made the PP, or the Progress Party, or Busia, unpopular. Let me give you a very quick example. When the NPP were coming into office, and Mahama had cancelled the teachers' allowance and the nursing and teacher training allowance, you saw how the NPP used that to campaign against them. And you see, and I'm sure that also, you agree with me, that also led to the fall of John Dramani Mahama, the former president. A lot of these students and teachers voted against him because he scrapped off the teacher and the nursing and teachers for training allowance. So these things still play part in our politics. But the issue is, why would Busia do this? The whole reason was that there was no money. The country was at the verge of collapsing, and there was no money, and so they had to try and then manage for the little of the money that they had gotten. So that was the reason why Busia would do that. Now let's again look at another reason for the overthrow of the Busia government. The next one was the introduction of the Aliens Compliance Order of 1979. The Aliens Compliance Order. Now, this Aliens Compliance Order was introduced by Busia to get rid of all foreign citizens who were without permit, legal permit in the country, or to stay and work in the country, because the economy of the country at this point were controlled by these foreign, or these citizens. So Busia felt that these foreign citizens should be taken out. Now, the problem then arose when the police were supposed to engage in that. Now, the police did it in such a way that a lot of people lost their lives, and also our properties. They carried the act in a very cruel manner, and so the order attracted a lot of criticisms from other neighboring countries. Condemnations by Burkina Faso and Nigeria, especially these two countries who had had their citizens mostly affected. Okay, and that also led to the decline of the image of Busia in the international stage. The last reason for the fall of Busia's government was the devaluation of the cedi. On December 1971, for 27, the cedi was devalued by 43% as against the dollar. Now, Busia explained that this was done to restore balance to the economy to control inflation and also stimulate new investments and boost industrial production. However, this policy came with it a lot of economic hardship on Ghanaians, especially those who are working in the private sector. So production levels in these industries started to decline, and this affected the process. Employment and wages were all affected. It led to the sharp increase in price of basic consumer goods, and a lot of people suffered. You know, the issue about devaluation is that when you do, your idea is that you want to restrict, importation, and you are hoping that more people will come into your country and buy with the dollar. But here is the case: a country that relies solely on foreign aid, on foreign importation, will certainly not be able to gain anything from this devaluation. And that has been the problem. And so these and many more reasons why the PP or Progress Party was overthrown. Share your view in the comment section and have a nice day.